we are wanting to just talk about Git structure, just kind of project structure, right? GitHub. Okay, well, yeah, kind of a similar thing. So there's an interesting bit about GitHub in that it's based on Git. It's more or less just a hosted version of Git. So I have a few ways that I like to structure my projects. Here is one module that I actually really like. And if you are building just like a regular PowerShell module, it would be a pretty good way to structure your code, because you will have, and yeah, this is a module about building modules. But it does, have your, metadata file kind of in the root directory, in the source directory of your GitHub project. And then you also have a public and private folder. And inside your private folder, you could have anything that you don't necessarily call directly with the module. So these would be just ways to simplify your scripts rather than building a function into one of your public functions. You can build it into this private one and then just call the private functions from within your public ones. And these are the actual commandlets that would end up being exported that your user could use. But since you're doing something with a GUI, it ends up needing to be structured a little bit different, right? So usually for a project like that, let me actually just get rid of this stuff. Most likely how I would end up structuring that, I would end up having one folder just as like my, I would almost call that either like lib, or you could also have source folders. So if you reference any libraries, usually I'd store those in lib. For all of the code that you've written, I'd store that in a source folder. And then whatever you would launch that from, usually I'd have, like my, let's just call it startup.ps1, something like that. And then with a structure like this, you could then also inline kind of have your, startup.tests.ps1, kind of build it in side by side to your function if you're doing pester testing or test-driven development, anything like that. Well, one thing as far as that goes, there's a few different ways to set up your code, and probably the easiest way. Oh, and of course these guys might have just merged in. So in here, we have our master branch. I just created a, new branch. That doesn't have to be your name. But usually, what you can end up doing is what we call feature branching. So if you are going to be working on your code with a whole bunch of different people, and or even, just by yourself, and you want to keep track of how many files are being changed, what you can typically do is just for every feature, create that new branch. And then once we actually get to using Git, all right. So we saw that I just deleted everything from that folder, so I have quite a few changes. So I can just go ahead and add these. I can commit, removing it all. So let me just go ahead and push that into master. And I use a combination of course, the Git for Windows, but then also PoshGit. And that's what gives me kind of these nice little details of what I've added, what I've changed, what I've removed. And then also what is included in my commit, that's in green. And then what is not included in my commit is in red. So it's a kind of simple visual way of just seeing from the command line what you have and haven't changed. But okay, so let's have our TechSnips demo. And we have all these files. we're currently on our master branch. Let's say we want to build a feature of, adding a widget. So we can say, git checkout -b. So that will not only create a branch, but then also switch us to that branch. It's just a little shortcut. It's the same as running, git branch, the name of your branch, and then git checkout that branch. So we can use git checkout -b, new widget. And now you can see we're on the new widget branch, just right there. And from here, we could, add a new file. Let's go to our lib and just new text file. Super secret source.txt. Once we've added that in, if we refresh this, you can see that we have one added file that hasn't been included in our commit. So we can just go ahead and add stage that for our commit, do that commit, adding source file, and then whenever we push, this time instead of pushing to origin master, we'll push to origin new widget. So origin means that we're pushing to our remote. And so you can actually manage Git projects just locally on your machine. And I'm probably gonna be wrong about this, but I think Git was created originally just to be able to track your source code production on your own machine. Then people figured out how to put it on a server and have everybody push their stuff to a server. So I have set up my remote, or in this case GitHub, as origin whenever I did my initial setup. So whenever I say, okay, I want to push this to my remote, I just specify that with origin, and then I specify my branch. So once we've done that, of course we can go back to TechSnips demo. Let's go ahead and refresh this. And we do see that we have just those two base files initially in our master branch, but whenever we go to new widget, we also have that lib file here. Once you add some files and once you're ready to merge them together, GitHub is pretty nice because it has this, already you've recently pushed to this branch, so you can go ahead and compare and pull them. We can also do this by going to pull requests right here and clicking new pull request. And this lets us, correct. Yeah, or this would be from your perspective, kind of. So after you've pushed to a branch, you can then come in here, or I guess, even a user, if they wanted to push code into your repository, this would be kind of the same way that they would go about doing it. Most likely what they would have to do, though, is create a fork, which would actually just copy all of your code. So instead of being under, McDonald BM /TechSnips demo, this could be under, Veronique /TechSnips demo. And, it would be, you would be able to modify it and then, create a request and send it to me. And I would be able to say, oh yeah, that's actually something I really like, and add it in there. So whenever you go to create a pull request, you have your base branch. So this is what you are merging into. And then you have your kind of compare branch, and this is where you're merging from. So it's a little counterintuitive. I don't like this display, but basically you merge from right to left, if that makes sense. So from here, you can see we're, adding our one source file, and then we can click that create pull request. If we want to delete any comments, like, usually this is where you could say, fix for Jira, whatever, or, closing, remedy, ticket, blah, blah. So this is where you could really tie into other, ticketing or versioning systems. But once you click create pull requests, then this is where any checks and balances would happen. So in your settings, you could set up to where, okay, you can't merge this pull request until you've had 2 reviewers or 1 reviewer approve it. And you can set that up in your settings, and we can go to that here in just a second. But there's also stuff like if you had any, oh yeah, it even says it right here. If you had any continuous integration set up, so if you used AppVeyor or Sake for PowerShell stuff, I'm trying to think of some words like Travis CI, I think. So yeah, you could also set up your continuous integration, and then eventually, once that either succeeded or was unsuccessful, you'd have a check mark or a red X right there. So that's pretty useful. And then, yeah, the last thing would be if it had any conflicts with the base branch. So let's say 2 commits in your code that you're trying to merge, both changed the same line of code. So let's say, in one we have write host, this is a great day, but then in another commit we have write host, this is a bad day. It'll say, hey, which one of these commits do you want to keep? Do you want to keep the one where we say it's a good day or the one where we say it's a bad day? So it would walk you through each of those, but then after you resolve all those conflicts, then you're able to merge. And I think, yeah, there are a couple options for merging, but for the most part, unless you have, a significant number of developers all kind of coding on top of each other, for the most part, you can just create a merge commit. These would be a little bit more advanced. Squashing just kind of takes all of your commit messages and condenses them into one commit message, if that makes sense. So it kind of eliminates a little bit of history, but if you have like 100 developers, you don't want to listen to them all the time. Yeah, so you do have a couple different branching strategies, and my favorite has always been feature branching. So anytime you want to make something new, you just create a new branch for that, you test it within that branch, and then you merge that branch into master, which could be considered your like production code, right? So I think what you're talking about is what we call, I actually forget the real word for it. I've always called it roll-up branching, where basically, you have your master branch, which is your production code. You could have a development branch, which would be your development code. And you could even extrapolate that further by saying, okay, for our QA code, we'll have a QA branch. So every time we create a feature, one of our developers creates a feature, they'll merge that into develop. Once it's ready to test, we'll merge it into QA. Once it passes QA, we'll merge it into master. And some people really like that. I personally don't, just because it gets a little confusing when you try and have, if you're making this open source and you want more people to contribute to it, it's a little harder to explain, okay, make your own branch, and then whenever you're ready, merge that branch into dev, and then we'll do our, internal QA on it. It makes it ends up adding a little more process to Git than I think is necessary, especially because in their code, you could do testing within that branch naturally, right? You don't necessarily need a development branch because it's already been developed in, say, a feature branch or in their, that open source developer's personal branch or something like that. Okay. And so one of the nice things about Git is everybody has their own opinion about it, and probably, if somebody's listening to this later on down the road, they're going to say, oh no, he's wrong. You're the right one. That's the way to do it. Really, whatever you are most comfortable with is the best way to use Git. So if you do like having that safety net, just make it to where nobody can merge into master except from dev. Again, you can set that up in the settings as well. That's something that you could do as well. I think, just because of the way GitHub is set out, you can look at all of the commits that are created. But then not only that, if you wanted, let's say, oh man, we really, removed everything. Let's go back to the commit before this point in time. So you can browse all of these commits. And let's say, oh, I really didn't want to do all that. Oh man, they used to have a revert button somewhere. But there are easy ways, and I'm blanking on off the top of my head to do this. But there are easy ways on how to revert back to certain points in time of your code. So, yeah, I think from the command line it might be easier, but basically, yeah, you can take this little hash here and then just say, okay, rather than, keeping all of this code that I've changed, I want to go back to right before I removed it all. Copy this hash and then say, all right, git revert, and go back to that point in time. So yeah, if you do end up, say, deploying something to the master branch that is really unsavory, you could pretty easily go back in time and say, okay, no, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to make, my master branch, my master code. Yeah, and then you could, just right before you reverted, make a new branch at, this point in time of your code and say, oh man, I want to get that fixed. Let me just create a new branch. You'll branch it off into, immediate bug fix branch. And then for your master, you'll revert that back to the point in time before that bug came up. So that's kind of a way you can manage different points in time and still be able to, have that safety net just by reverting your code. And some people aren't as comfortable with that. So if you'd rather have a dev branch, maybe get people on a fast track release using the dev branch, and then once you confirm that the stuff you build in is production worthy, and then build that into a master branch, by all means go for it. I will admit most of the teams that I work on are fewer than like 8 people. So we tend to not step on each other that much. So just reducing the overhead of having that extra step from, merging a feature branch into dev into master, just reducing that overhead is really helpful for us. But yeah, if you are concerned about that safety net, if you don't want to push anything into production that might have a bug that might, say, tarnish your brand, yeah, you really wouldn't want to do that. So having that safety net of having the extra branch would be, perfectly okay. Definitely doable. Yeah, so whenever somebody creates a pull request, you can specify, let's say like we wanted to add a README to our code. You could specify in here somewhere, contribution guidelines, and then specify what all they would need to do. So you could start with like, fork this repository, add your code. And then another thing that more and more people have been doing is saying like, write your own unit tests with Pester, perhaps. So you could have this, contribution guideline of, okay, you have to have your own unit tests, you have to have your own code. And then whenever somebody goes to create a pull request, let's just leave that. Whenever somebody goes to create a pull request, you'll actually be able to see the difference. Yeah, so let's go ahead and create this. We'll just do a dummy comment there. You should, yeah, be able to look at their commits. So just from a, and actually I think, okay, yeah, you can also see the number of files changed, and this is where we would see a little bit more detail. Of course, I didn't put anything in that text file, but you could see the number of lines that are added. They would just kind of have a green background. The number of lines that are removed, they would have a red background. And yeah, the more files you have, the more files that have changed. You'll be able to look at the diff between them. So just from a high level, just looking at their code, that's kind of your first way to do it. Another way is if you have somebody who gets really lazy and yes, they write pester tests, but they end up just, mocking true back for everything that they wrote, it would get you 100% code coverage, but it wouldn't be a good valid test, right? You could just see that right off the bat and say, hey, this is not acceptable. This isn't something that we want. And you can just close their pull request, ignore their code that they tried to contribute. But yeah, let's say they are ready to contribute something. Let's go to text snip scripts, and I'll actually just fork this repository, and let's just say in our README. Yeah, and if I wanted to go back to that original repository, I could see text snip scripts. But because I have forked it, I have my McDonald BM snip scripts. So yeah, this is kind of my personal branch. So I can, yeah, I think this was my commit that I added at one point. I have a custom edit to the README because I'm a cool guy. So, excuse me. Let me actually just go back here, and I'm going to clone this to my machine. Oop, that's not what I wanted. So let me back up one bit, and we are going to clone that repo. And once we're here, okay, it looks like Adam is quite far ahead of me. So let me try and see if I can fix this a bit. So now that we have this on our machine, let's just see. Okay, yeah, there's like 1 million folders in there. It might actually be easier to view this just by looking at the folder itself. Okay. So we have all of these folders. What we can do, let's say we want to add our own. Let's make our own git checkout-b. Okay, so now I'm in my snips test branch. And here, what we can do, let's just add a new folder with all of my fun scripts. And we will just give it a quick, test.ps1. And inside this guy, let's just say write host hello world. Classic. All right. So we'll save that. And going back to Git, once we refresh that, we'll see that we have our one added file. So let's go ahead and add that. Oops. Git add that. And once we've added that, we can make our commit of, and this is a really sloppy commit, so if you're watching at home, don't do what I do. We'll just say added my own stuff. All right, so once we've added that, we now can git push origin master, because again, this is going to push into my, or actually, we don't want to push into master. We want to push into snips test. So this pushes all of those changes that I made. Sweet, it is. Okay, so yeah, what that did is it pushed all of those changes into my personal fork with that branch name. So going back to GitHub, yeah, I have pushed my snips test branch, and we can make our pull request. So I make my pull request from, yeah, my McDonald BM snip scripts snips test, and whenever I choose the fork, so TextSnip snip scripts, I can also say I want to create a branch snips test in his fork. So yeah, and I think just because all of my pointers are a little bit broken, this isn't letting me create this pull request, but yeah, you would normally be able to create that pull request. And then, yeah, so you could say, hey, whenever you try and create a pull request, make that pull request into a particular branch. Or even if you wanted to have, a branch called community contributions, and people could submit their pull requests to that one. That way it's a little more organized on your end. But you can, whenever you are, branching across forks, choose a base on the remote end, or on the origins end, the TextSnips. Yes, so this would be, the master branch of the TextSnips repo. Now, you will see, and actually I'm not sure how Adam has created this. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a pull request to his master branch, and I think he has it set up to where I can't just automatically merge. Yeah, okay, so only those with write access can merge pull requests, so that's good. So I can't automatically merge into there. He has to come in, or somebody, if he has it set up to where reviewers automatically get assigned, those people would need to come in, potentially resolve these conflicts, and then once they do, then they would be able to merge that. So now merging directly into master, again, is pretty sloppy. So if you wanted to, and I thought, and maybe I'm wrong here as well, I thought you could create a branch to merge into, but you may need to say on your repository, create a branch just called, contributions or contributing or something like that, for people, say, like me, who create a fork, create their own branch to be able to merge into. Yeah, so the security settings for these are actually pretty robust. So you can, just from branch over branch, have different rules. So let's say in our master branch, we want to protect this branch, which disables force pushes. Let's say we want to require pull request reviews, and you can have, I guess up to 6 reviews. Let's say we want to have 2 people give it a thumbs up before anybody can merge that. And let's say, yes, require status checks to pass. You can write some status checks, say like, oh yeah, before you can even create a pull request, you have to have 100% code coverage on your pester tests, and that has to be executable through, Apve or Travis CI or something like that. So you can have all that. Yeah, there's quite a few just regular branching protections that you can create. And then also where is that? I think in Collaborators is where, so this is where you can add folks. So let's say, let's say I want to add Adam. I think I should be able to just add him. And yeah, he would then get a link to be able to contribute and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm just going to cancel that for now. Sorry, Adam, for the spam. So yeah, you can add folks to help manage your repository. I think because I'm on a free account, I don't get as many options. I'm thinking for the stuff that I do for work, we have quite a few more settings in here, especially regarding like forking and merges from forks and all that sort of stuff. But at least from a free account, you can definitely see, okay, we can protect these branches. We can do, yeah, so here we go. The default branch is considered a base branch. So all pull requests and code commits are made against it. So if you wanted to, this is where you could specify, oh yeah, rather than even giving people the option to try and merge into master, we could have this like contributor branch or something, and have people by default do their pull requests to the contrib branch. And then yeah, from there you would be able to say put some protections in around that as well, and yeah, make sure that only signed commits, only something like that were allowed, so you could verify that the developer is exactly who they say they are. So yeah, there's quite a few different settings in here, security wise. Again, and I'll say this over and over, the best way to use Git is however you feel. So yeah, again, like using those dev branches and using kind of multiple layers of protections to try and catch bugs and catch anything before you merge into master. Like if that's what makes you feel more comfortable, then by all means do that, because at the end of the day, that's going to be what gets you using Git more. That's going to be what makes you confident in any release you have. Then use that. Me personally, again, I like to do just the feature branching and merge directly into master. But I work on smaller teams and we work with faster releases and we roll back relatively often. So yeah, it's not necessarily a better way. It's just the way that we're more comfortable, just letting us speed up a little bit more by removing some of that process. So yeah, whatever way you like best, use that. And there are tons of strategies, tons of blog articles out there on the benefits of one over the other, and I'm sure this will be one of those things that's just argued until the end of time. But yeah, but yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, just do whatever you like, and that'll be the best. This is where I think feature branching really comes into play. So this way, even if I'm working on 3 different features, I would end up having 3 different feature branches that each focus specifically on that one feature, right? So whenever I go to test, if I needed that code locally, I could just, git checkout, whatever that branch is called for that feature. Once I have that checked out, I could then either run that code from that point, or I could, if we wanted to maybe run the pester tests that were included in that branch or something along those lines, I could play with the code at that point with that branch, with just that feature being the only thing that was added. So if there is something that breaks, if I go through my normal tests, if I launch my GUI, if I, I forget what exactly your script does, but let's say I, poke around, press all the buttons, I maybe try and give it an invalid path for some kind of input, and it gives me the appropriate error, right? I could go through like my usual test steps to make sure that everything is looking great. And then, yeah, of course, once I approve it through my QA process, then I can just merge that feature branch into master. And then it's good. It's golden. It's ready to go. I can then, go back, check out my next feature, and then rinse, repeat, do those same steps, do all the testing, test around maybe what feature I just added or what code I just added. make sure that, all the buttons work right, all that sort of stuff. So that's why I like feature branching, is because it isolates everything into, tiny little sandboxes. So on my feature branch of adding a widget, I won't do any, bug fixes on that branch, because all that branch does is add widgets. It's a way of, not making sure that, a code change over on, one feature doesn't interfere with another. And I think that's one of the arguments against having that dev branch, is you're adding so many different features to that dev branch that if you do find a bug, do we know exactly where it came from, right? So, that's just, my comment on that. That's not necessarily more true or less true than, say, doing all my testing on each feature branch and merging it into master. So, that's kind of how I handle it, is by having everything in its own feature branch, you can then do all your testing from within that branch. And once it's ready, then merge it into master. It also, if you're going to utilize the issues feature to kind of track what features you want to have added, let's say we just want to do like a feature request. You can then kind of say, okay, this branch will solve this issue. So once we merge this branch into our master, we can come in and then close this issue from within GitHub, right? So it's not, and I guess the issue tracking is kind of like a, task list more than anything for a developer. But it is just one more way of kind of managing work, especially on a distributed team or for an open source project. I know a lot of people use labels for their feature or for their issues. So if you want to label this up for grabs, then anybody could take this, make their own branch to solve it, and then eventually merge that back in, right? So just that's why I like feature branching, is it lets you have a one-to-one branch to issue relationship as well.